Hi, I'm David Weissman, and this is my presentation on alternative fuels. History. Electric vehicles have a long history going back to the early 20th century and the very beginning of cars. They were popular for a while, but once cars powered by internal combustion engines became easier to use and the price of gasoline came down, electric cars were largely phased out in favor of gasoline, and that was the case for most of the 20th century. Present. A number of causes have been used in order to advocate for alternative fuel vehicles. These include environmental problems such as air pollution, and economic concerns over availability and rising costs of oil, political problems associated with U.S. dependence on foreign oil, and the scientific and technological desire for progress. Now, the internal combustion engine has remained largely unchanged for the whole of the 20th century. All other technologies, TV, computers, such, have evolved enormously, but the engine mostly the same as it was. The electric car is the most popular and new choice for alternative energy after hybrids. The pros of this are relatively low environmental impact and they have very efficient engines. However, they have a very, very low range and a high initial cost. The Nissan Leaf, for example, one of the most popular, has a range of only 100 miles stated. You'll get less than that if it's very cold and very hot outside, depending on how you drive. And it costs into the high 30,000s, so you could get a similarly equipped car from Nissan for much less. Clean diesel. Diesel is an old technology. It's been around for the entire 20th century, around the same time as gasoline engines, which mostly have been used in trucks and other industrial applications because it's not very refined. It's kind of loud and dirty and noisy. But now it's becoming cleaner and more refined, so it's being used in passenger cars. Many Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen are putting a lot of diesel vehicles out. They've been doing that for many years. They've been the ones advocating for it. Pros are a high range and good value for money. The cons are that diesel fuel is more expensive in some places than gasoline. It's still dirty and noisy even though it's cleaner than it was. And there's minimal diesel infrastructure beyond highways compared to gasoline. This is a problem along all types of alternative fuels. We'll talk about that and then get to hydrogen. Hydrogen fuel cells. The pros are high range and high MPG. The Hydrogen FCX Clarity is the most prominent hydrogen vehicle. They're not actually for sale. You can only lease them in certain areas. But that has a stated combined range of 60 mpg. And the range is 240 miles. Compare that to 100 from a Leaf. And the hydrogen fuel cell cars emit only heat and water, so they don't pollute. The cons is they're still more expensive than traditional vehicles because it's difficult and expensive to package hydrogen and put it in a car. That's mainly why. Although that technology will improve with time. And there would need to be an entirely new infrastructure for hydrogen fueling stations. We couldn't use the gas stations we have now. And that's also a problem with electric cars, that charging stations are few and far between. I don't know, some people may have noticed in some parking garages at the U of A there are charging points. That's pretty ahead of the curve. Many places don't have charging points. And so that can make refueling your car difficult. That can lead to actually something called range anxiety, which is what electric cars manufacturers have been kind of dealing with from consumers. Well, they'll know that their range is very low, so people will constantly be driving as if you're on the E for a gas tank, because the range is that low, and it's so widely variable. In conclusion, all technology will increase in quality and decrease in price. This has been the model for most of history, really, especially the 20th century. Just look at computers. They're much better now and much cheaper if you adjust for inflation than they were, say, in the 90s. However, the government should allow the market to decide what is the best choice for consumers rather than aggressively subsidizing alternative energy vehicles if they don't make business sense. And the government has a habit of doing that. But for this case, it really is the consumer that makes the choice. Currently, conventional gasoline vehicles are still outselling new vehicles, I should specify. New vehicles are radically outselling alternative energy vehicles because they're just too expensive for practical purposes. Gasoline vehicles make more sense for the average consumer. Government subsidies can allow them to become better reach of the average consumer, but if technology doesn't make sense, it just doesn't make sense to push it. government should be subsidizing research, they should do is if you're going to subsidize one kind of alternative fuel, subsidize all of them equally or don't subsidize anything. The government should not be playing favorites with that. That's a big problem with the Chevy Volt. It was stated to be an electric vehicle with something like 60 mpg. Came out, it was much less mpg, and there was a massive amount of government subsidies. It was actually on trying to be a hybrid. The plans were changed. It was an actual electric vehicle. There's many other vehicles that the government is subsidizing. The Nissan Leaf has a $7,500 tax credit. That brings down the price for the consumer, although if we look at the numbers, we'd see that it was still more expensive than the equivalently equipped vehicle and really a very low range, not practical. Alright, so I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening, and good luck with your other presentations.